13 men slip through the narrow streets of Jerusalem as the sky bruises into twilight. The city is a powder keg. You have seen it painted by Leonardo da Vinci. You have seen it in children's Bibles. Carved into wooden wall plaques, they can whisper without the rest of the room hearing a single syllable. Jesus dips a piece of torn, unleavened bread into the dark. Bitter herbs. He reaches out his hand. He gives it to Judas. Judas is not hiding in the shadows at the far end of a long wooden table. He is occupying the seat of honor. The placement is not an oversight. It is a heartbreak. Jesus has taken the man actively selling him to the imperial slaughter and placed him in the highest seat of dignity the triclinium has to offer. He has drawn the betrayer so close that their robes are tangled. He has pulled the knife wielder directly into his own personal space. You cannot hand a piece of soaked bread across a Renaissance table without standing up and walking around it. You hand it to the man whose shoulder is pressing against yours. When Jesus offers the dipped morsel, it is an ancient Middle Eastern gesture of profound friendship. The piece of bread is not an accusation. It is an invitation. It is the host saying, "I know exactly what you carry in your cloak, and I am honoring you anyway." Judas takes the dripping bread from the fingers of the man he is about to murder. The olive oil stains his skin. The silence in the room stretches tight, vibrating like a plucked bowstring. Judas stands up. He breaks the physical connection of and glowing in the stained glass of local cathedrals. A long, rectangular wooden table. Jesus sitting dead center. Anakemai. He steps away from the heavy, woven cushions. He walks out into the cold, crushing dark of the Jerusalem night. And the moment the heavy door shuts behind him, the architecture of the room changes. Because the true subversion of this meal is not just who Jesus placed in the seat of honor. It is what he does with the empire's power dynamic next. We do not recline on woven wool cushions anymore. But you are still deeply familiar with the architecture of the room. You know exactly how the mathematics of proximity work. You know the exhausting anxiety of wondering if you have been invited to the right dinners, if you are sitting at the right tables, if your name is written on the right lists. You have felt the subtle, unspoken calculations that dictate who belongs in your inner circle and who must be kept at a safe, manageable distance. We have simply traded the stone platforms of the Roman triclinium for the polished expanse of the corporate boardroom, the glowing screen of the exclusive group chat, and the carefully curated guest list. The furniture has evolved, but the social geometry remains completely identical. We place the people who can elevate our status in the seats of honor, and we relegate the liabilities to the absolute margins. 6 disciples arranged neatly on his left, 6 on his right, all sitting perfectly upright in heavy wooden chairs. Think about how fiercely you guard your own access. When you feel the cold glass of a smartphone screen as you deliberately ignore a message from someone who has crossed you, or when you sit with rigid, tense posture in a room, refusing to acknowledge arrival, you are participating in the exact same power dynamics the Romans perfected. You can almost hear the heavy, suffocating silence that falls over a room when the wrong person walks in. We use our personal proximity as a form of currency. We ration out our intimacy only to those who can offer a return on the investment. And we build massive, invisible walls to protect ourselves from anyone who might damage our fragile empires. This careful curation of who gets close to us is not a harmless boundary. It is the empire operating inside our own chests. If you are in a season where you are exhausted by the constant need to protect your status, the seating chart of this Passover meal is a terrifying mirror. You look at the people you have meticulously frozen out of your life, the colleague who threatened your stability, the family member who broke your trust, the friend who became too emotionally heavy to carry. And then you look back at the upper room, watching Jesus hand a piece of oil-soaked bread to Judas. Jesus did not build a defensive boundary. He did not distance himself from the active threat, facing forward as if posing for a portrait. It is an image so deeply embedded in our collective imagination that it feels like historical fact. He took the man holding the imperial dagger and pulled him into the space where they were sharing the exact same breath. He dismantled the entire economy of human power by giving the highest honor to the one who deserved immediate expulsion. But the radical grace of the seating arrangement was only the beginning. The true revolution of the night was not just where the men were positioned, but what the host was about to do with his own hands. The door clicks shut. The betrayer is gone. The remaining men shift uneasily on their heavy cushions. The night outside is deepening. The Antonia fortress hums with the clatter of Roman steel. The temple altar across the city is slick with Passover blood. Thousands of lambs have been slaughtered today. Thousands of families are eating this exact same meal. But in this room, the script is being torn apart. Jesus reaches for the bread. It is rough. It is flat. It is the unleavened ration of a people fleeing in the dark. He wraps his hands around it. He breaks it. The sharp crack of the crust echoes in the dim, smoky light of the oil lamps. Look at the hands doing the breaking. A Roman host uses a banquet to extract loyalty. He serves the softest, finest bread. But that image is a fiction. The last meal of Jesus was not a formal European banquet. It was a calculated act of political subversion. He distributes it strictly according to your social rank. He feeds you so he can own you. Jesus holds up the course. Shattered loaf. He does not demand an oath. He does not promise a political uprising. He speaks of his own crushing. This is my body, given for you. The bread is not a symbol of his power. It is the surrender of it. The men on the cushions stare in silence. This makes no sense in a world ruled by Caesar. Rome feeds its people to the empire. The emperor crushes the vulnerable to build his marble monuments. The wealthy patrician consumes the labor of the poor to fund his lavish feasts. The strong survive by eating the weak. Jesus reverses the entire cosmic food chain. The king does not consume his subjects. The king feeds himself to them. He passes the broken pieces to his left. He passes them to his right. He does not wait for a servant. He does not ask for assistance. The bread is handed to Matthew. The tax collector eats. The bread is handed to Simon. The zealot eats. The bread is handed to Peter. The denier eats. Calloused fishermen's hands take the bread. Dirty fingernails pull it apart. The smell of charred grain and bitter herbs fills the space between them. Then he lifts the heavy stone jar. He pours the wine into a shared clay cup. The liquid is thick. It is dark red. The rim is stained. In the first-century Roman world, a dinner party was never just a dinner party. It was a weapon. A Roman general demands the blood of his enemies to secure his borders. A Roman host pours vintage wine to intoxicate his elite allies. Jesus offers his own blood to secure his betrayers. He hands the cup to the very men who will scatter into the dark in less than 3 hours. The cup goes around the U-shaped arrangement. Mouths touch the same clay. Throats swallow the same heavy wine. He is dismantling the hierarchy of the earth, one bite at a time. The triclinium was designed to elevate the one and humiliate the many. Jesus is using it to empty himself completely. But the broken bread and the poured wine are only the prologue. The ultimate subversion of this dining room is not what the host feeds his guests. It is what he does when he takes off his outer garment. When a banquet in the ancient Mediterranean world begins, a mandatory, entirely invisible, ritual takes place at the door. The streets of a first-century city are essentially open sewers, choked with the dust of the desert, the waste of pack animals, and the refuse of thousands of traveling pilgrims. Because the guests will be reclining on the triclinium, their bodies angled inward, with their heads hovering near the food. They're bare. Unwashed feet are naturally thrust outward, exposed along the outer perimeter of the cushions. The Romans used the dining room to enforce the strict hierarchy of their empire. Everything from the quality of the wine. Therefore, a slave, specifically the lowest-ranking slave in the household hierarchy, is positioned at the entrance with a basin of water and a rough towel, tasked with scrubbing the filth from the heels of the elite before they ever touch the couches. The host never washes feet. The host does not even acknowledge the slave doing the washing. But in the Gospel of John, Jesus does something that completely fractures the social protocol of the evening. He does not wash their feet at the door. He waits until they are already reclining. until the meal is already underway. And then he stands up from the seat of honor. He strips off his outer garment, peeling back the visible layers of his rabbinic authority. He takes a coarse linen towel and ties it around his waist. He pours cold water into a heavy basin. A sharp sound of the splashing water cutting through the tense silence of the room. And then, the host walks to the outside of the U-shaped arrangement, drops to his knees on the hard stone floor, and takes the dirt-caked heels of his followers into his bare hands. The towel is not a prop for a polite moral lesson. It is the literal, undeniable uniform of human property. When Jesus wraps that rough linen around his waist, he is actively taking on. To the height of the tables was designed to remind you exactly how much power you had or how little you mattered. The physical identity of the people the empire considers entirely disposable. He is scrubbing the grime off the skin of men, who have spent the last 3 years arguing about which of them is the greatest. Men who are calculating their own political advancement. Men who are inches away from abandoning him to the Roman guard. In the Roman matrix of power, the entire system relies on the absolute separation between the master and the servant. The hierarchy only holds its shape if the people at the top refuse to touch the ground. But if the man occupying the center of the triclinium willingly descends to the cold stone floor to do the work of a slave, the architectural integrity of the empire collapses. He is proving that the kingdom of heaven does not operate by extracting labor from the bottom to elevate the top. It operates by the top, pouring itself out entirely, to wash the bottom. This is the ultimate scandal of the upper room. The disciples walked into a space engineered by the Romans to enforce human dominance. And they watched their God deliberately take the posture of the oppressed. The meal eventually ends. The final cups are drained. The ancient Hallel hymns are sung into the flickering dark. But the revolution that began on those cushions is about to bleed out. The arrangement of the room was a map of human worth. The real question of this night is not just what they ate. It is this: into the narrow streets of Jerusalem. And it will permanently alter the shape of every table left on earth. 13 men walked into a room built for hierarchy and claimed the posture of absolute freedom. They reclined on heavy woven cushions and staged a silent protest against the Roman Empire. Jesus took the man, actively selling him to the slaughter, and placed him in the highest seat of dignity the triclinium had to offer. He offered a piece of oil-soaked bread and turned a moment of betrayal into a breathtaking invitation. He broke coarse, unleavened rations and reversed the entire cosmic food chain. He poured dark red wine into a shared clay cup and secured his scattering's followers with his own life. He stripped off his outer garment, dropped to the cold stone floor, and washed the dirt from their heels and dismantled the architecture of human power forever. One meal, one overturned empire. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the cushion to his immediate left. The locus consularis. The seat of honor is not a reward for flawless loyalty. It is the offensive, unmerited proximity of grace. How did Jesus arrange the room? Because when you peel back the layers of tradition, and when you look at the specific language the gospel writers used, it was not reserved for the disciple who understood the theology the best. It was not saved for the friend whose allegiance was unquestionable. The position of ultimate intimacy was given to a man whose pockets were already heavy with silver, whose heart was already hardened toward violence, and he was still intentionally drawn into the exact same airspace as the host. If you are in a season where you feel like a liability to the people around you, or where your own failures feel entirely too heavy to carry, the geometry of this room is a place to sit. Jesus does not ask you to clean yourself up before you are allowed to recline. He does not demand that you perfect your allegiance before he offers you the bread. He does not keep you at a safe, manageable distance. He pulls you into his immediate space, knowing exactly what you carry in your cloak. If this opened something up for you, subscribe and leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted by the constant, crushing need to protect their status and prove their worth. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who willingly abandoned the center couch to wash the dust, hundreds of thousands of Jewish pilgrims are crammed into the ancient capital, filling the air with the sound of bleating sheep and whispered prayers. The wooden chairs disappear. The long table vanishes. Jesus is not hosting a polite religious gathering. He is taking the dining habits of the Roman elite from our wandering feet, meet you on the absolute bottom of the floor, and pull you up into a rest you could never have earned, stripping them of their arrogance and handing them to fishermen, rebels, and outcasts. He is staging a silent, deafening protest against the way the world operates. To see the scandal of this meal, you have to leave the Renaissance behind. You have to step into the architecture of a first-century dining room. The floor of a wealthy first-century dining room was built around a very specific piece of furniture. It was called a triclinium. The word literally means 3 couches, instead of individual chairs. Low stone or wooden platforms were arranged in a tight, U-shaped configuration around a central space where servants could easily replace clay bowls and refill wine jugs. You did not sit. You reclined on your left side, your weight supported by heavy woven cushions, leaving your right hand free to reach for olives, warm bread, or dripping pieces of roasted meat. To the Roman mind, a banquet was the ultimate theater of power. When an elite Roman citizen hosted a dinner, the invitations were never about simple friendship. The guest list was a meticulously calculated ledger of political favors, financial debts owed, and strategic alliances needed. And the architecture of the triclinium itself was the instrument that strictly enforced this social hierarchy. The seating arrangement was practically bound by law. They are here to remember the Exodus. They are here to celebrate the night the blood of a lamb shattered the chains of the greatest empire on earth. The couch on the right side of the U was entirely for the lowest-ranking guests. The couch on the left was designated for the host and his immediate circle. But the central couch, specifically the highest position on that middle couch, known as the locus consularis, was fiercely reserved for the single most important person in the room. If you walked into a Roman villa during a feast, you did not have to ask who held the political leverage. You only had to look at who was leaning against the cushions of that central seat. Even the food itself was actively weaponized. A wealthy host might serve himself and the guest of honor a delicate, honey-roasted bird on a polished silver platter, while the men relegated to the lowest couch were handed tough, gristle-filled cuts of cheap meat on rough clay plates. Imagine the quiet humiliation of that room. You recline on the right side of the table, sipping watered-down, vinegary wine, forced to watch the men just a few feet away feast on delicacies you could never afford. The dining room was not a place of rest. It was a theater of subjugation. It was a physical mechanism engineered to violently remind the poor that they were poor, the vulnerable that they were vulnerable, and the powerful that they were entirely untouchable. And the current empire is fully aware of it. Roman soldiers stand shoulder to shoulder on the walls of the Antonia fortress. Every time the Roman elite reclined at a meal, they were rehearsing the stratified, dominant reality of the empire they had built with their legions. This was the cultural water everyone in the first-century Mediterranean world was swimming in. The unwritten rules of the table were the unbreakable rules of the world. The powerful recline, the weak serve, and everyone knows exactly where they belong in the pecking order. But the 13 men walking up the stone steps of a borrowed house in Jerusalem are not Roman patricians, and they are not interested in preserving the status quo. They are about to take the posture of the oppressor, bring it into a Jewish feast, and twist it into something the empire could never have anticipated. The door closes. The heavy iron latch falls. The noise of the city fades into a muffled hum. Inside the upper room, the air is thick and still. The smell of charred, roasted lamb hangs over the space. Bitter herbs are crushed into clay bowls. Stacks of dry, unleavened bread sit on the low table. Heavy stone jars wait full of dark red wine. Jesus steps toward the low platform. The fishermen follow, their hands tight around the heavy shafts of their spears. They look down at the temple courts. They watch the throngs of people. The tax collector follows. The zealot follows. They do not pull up heavy wooden chairs. They do not stand at attention. They do not kneel. They drop to the floor. They arrange themselves on the low cushions. They lean heavily on their left elbows. They stretch out their tired legs. They take the exact, undeniable posture of the Roman elite. This is a deliberate, highly charged choice. According to ancient Jewish rabbinic tradition, even the poorest man in Israel must recline on the night of Passover. The rabbis commanded it. Why? Because slaves eat on their feet. Slaves eat in a hurry. Sandals strapped tight. Bags packed. Slaves hold their bowls in trembling hands, waiting for the master's whip. Free men recline. Free men rest. Free men take up space. When these 13 Jewish men lean back into the rough woven wool of the cushions, they are sending a silent, theological message. They are fully aware of the towering walls of the Antonia fortress just down the street. They are fully aware of the spears and the shields and the Roman eagles. This is not a polite imitation of high society. It is a declaration of defiance. They are acting like royalty in an occupied city. They are claiming absolute freedom in a world that treats them. They know that Passover is the season of riots, of zealots hiding daggers under their woolen cloaks, as disposable labor. Every time a coarse hand reaches for a piece of bread, the posture speaks. Every time a cup of wine is raised, the angle of their bodies tells a story. The empire outside demands endless submission. The table inside declares divine liberation. Rome says they are subjects. The cushions say they are heirs. They recline. They breathe in the smoke of the lamps. They wait for the host to break the bread. But as the meal begins, the triumphant, revolutionary high of the room begins to fracture. The tension shifts. Jesus is about to use the rigid architecture of this triclinium to drop a devastating bombshell. And to understand the sheer shock of what happens next, you have to look at the exact Greek verb the Gospel of Mark uses to describe how their bodies are arranged. It is a word that changes the entire geometry of the room. Mark chapter 14, verse 18. The Passover meal is fully underway, the sharp taste of the bitter herbs still lingering on their tongues, and the disciples are finally settling into the heavy woven cushions of their newfound liberation. It is the pinnacle of their 3-year journey together. And then Jesus shatters the quiet, confident hum of the room by calmly announcing that one of sudden violence bursting out in the name of a forgotten freedom. But away from the shouts of the street, of the men eating with him, is about to hand him over to the imperial authorities. But before Jesus drops this theological grenade, Mark provides a critical architectural detail that we completely miss when we project our modern dining habits onto the ancient text. Our English translations typically gloss over the mechanics of the moment, stating simply that they were reclining at the table or sitting down to eat. But the specific Greek verb Mark chooses to describe their physical orientation is the word anakaimai. It is a compound word carrying a very specific, undeniable physical weight. The prefix ana means upward or back, while the root chemai means to lie down, to be placed, or to be laid completely to rest. It is not a casual verb for grabbing a quick bite on the go, and it is certainly not the posture of men sitting stiffly in wooden chairs. In the Greco-Roman world, anakaimai was the highly technical term for participating in a formal, structured banquet. Because of the tight, U-shaped arrangement of the triclinium, you could not recline without your head resting dangerously close to the chest of the man positioned immediately to your left. It is the exact same word Matthew uses in his gospel to describe Jesus eating with tax collectors and outcasts. In a quiet upper room, a heavy wooden door shuts. The air inside is thick with the heat of the day. The religious elite in that story were not simply angry that Jesus was in the same building as the dregs of society. They were deeply offended because he was anakaimai with them. He was granting them the honor of the triclinium, signaling to the entire social hierarchy that these untouchables were his absolute equals. That single root changes the entire emotional frequency of the betrayal. The Last Supper is not a polite gathering of independent individuals separated by mahogany. It is a vulnerable entanglement of flesh and trust. If the mechanics of this first-century room are stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. The bodies of these 13 men are physically overlapping in the dim light of the oil lamps. You cannot betray a man from the other side of the room in this specific configuration. You have to betray him while smelling the dark wine on his breath, while feeling the radiating heat of his skin, and while reaching your fingers into the exact same clay bowl of crushed herbs. The scent of crushed bitter herbs, and the black smoke of clay oil lamps. A meal is about to begin. You know this scene. To strike a man in this position is a violation of the deepest cultural sanctity imaginable. But the true devastation of this moment is not just their physical closeness. It is the specific cushion the betrayer is occupying. The oil lamps flicker, casting long, bruised shadows against the rough stone walls. The air is heavy with the smell of roasted lamb and the sharp, metallic tang of spilled wine. Jesus occupies the central couch. He is the host. According to the rigid geometry of the Roman triclinium, the man reclining to his immediate right is in the position of intimacy, because they are leaning on their left elbows. The man on the right has his head resting near the chest of the host. We know from the Gospel of John that the beloved disciple holds this space. He can feel the physical rhythm of his rabbi's breathing, but the seat to the immediate left is different. In the Roman world, the seat to the left of the host is the highest position of honor in the room, the locus consularis. It is the place fiercely reserved for the most trusted confidant, the chief guest, the VIP. Because of how their bodies are angled, the host and the man on his left share the same airspace. They share the same immediate clay bowl.